between Britain and America, structures of power, authority, domination, between a range of sexual identities, white, academic, authorized discourses, and those of a painter, performer, film critic, shaman, concrete, sound poet, straddling a Dutch, American, French, Scotch, and Mi'kmaq heritage, between science and sanity, Bill Bissett inscribes a language of textual hybridity, which explodes into an intrasubjective matrix of differential locations, allocations, relations, inscribing a Krasipskian model of non-elementalism.
I got a feeling we're gonna make this one strong. We got the holy breeze coming through the trees. We got the holy breeze coming through the trees. Now, honey, we got the all the love is flowing higher, shimmy, all through our soul, down you can shimmy, hey, I get a shimmy, a higher, get a shimmy, you push him in a higher, get a shimmy, mama, shana, oh, get a shimmy, a higher, get a shimmy, oh, yo, shana, oh, yo, kushini, Haya Krishna, Haya Krishna, Haya Krishna, Haya Krishna, Haya Krishna. I'm so hungry, can I feed my soul?
And perhaps like how for Marshall McLuhan, acoustic space, the inner landscape of poetry is a field of discontinuous components, fields of relation, elation, eration, which is dynamic and in flux, creating its own dimensions out of itself. Within these sonoric axes of fracturous raptures, we are reminded of Krasipski's axiom that structure is always a complex of relations, resounding with not so much an efficient but a coefficient causality, where effect begets effect in an erratic praxis of secular vectors, as a nexus of lexus, heuristic excess, a nexus of effect, celebrating all that is unclean, insani, and as such, we enter an asylum where language is both a haven and housing, a schizophonophilia full of abstraction and logical insanity. Travel through a chanting insistence where we penetrate far below the conscious levels of thought and feeling, sinking into the most primitive and forgotten, into not a landscape, but a lang escape, a sonorific matrix of worlds, levels, layers of being created out of syllabic accents, and in so doing, exceeds standard models of exchange, for this disorientation affects alternate states of being, disrupts normative thought patterns, and erupts in a kind of combinatorial erogenous deviance, a vibrational political sonocentrics of rhythm, pulse, plays, plies with narrative enigma, oral aisles of exits, entrances, and trances, highlighting language's transformational capacities, for grounding its corporeal and material affects, how it stimulates, engages the nervous system, establishes a vibratory nexus, transmitting intelligence and emotion simultaneously.
Is the crossing of the waters, is the crossing the wires, is the singing, is the singing, is the sheep.
Okay, enough of that. And as here is a here, is a here, as a here, is a here, is a here, as A is an A, is an art, as an artery, we are reminded how is never what is, that language is always pointing to that which it is not, and not just pointing to the Korzybskian theorem, but how according to 13th century Kabbalists, it is through the chanting of the letters that life is brought into existence. Through letter combination and permutation, the world is remade anew. And through this renegotiation of sound and texture, Bissett is not only reminding us of the relationship between language and reality, but is also uncannily mirroring the Kabbalistic practice of creating a golem, as outlined by Rabbi Eliezer Rokeach Worms, whereby one must assemble the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and with appropriate head and lip movements, permute them with the tetragrammaton and all the vowels in the array of the 221 gates of meaning. Through 75 years, 221 gates of the schizophonetic poetics, obsessive letter combination and permutation, Bissett is creating a poetics of abstraction, or in Korzybskian terms, an interdependent heuristics, which speaks to many worlds simultaneously and asks us to both hear and see language in new ways. Full of echoes, moisture murmurings, where rippling shines sweat, dripping Bissett reminds us how borders become a series of traces, echoes, cinders inscribed in a spectral economy of exile, rupture, movement, and uncertainty, inscribing a language that is infinitely raging, textatic, visionary, and sublingual, and through a star-studded gathering of the judged, and the judging reminds us how there is no essential story, so many viewpoints, so many views, approximations, and seep inside each other all. And this sense of orality is directly synectic of the gaps, caesuras, and silences which exist between the language, which is a signifier of power, and the experience it represents, and provides a constant reminder of language's utter or inherent uncontainability, and summons direct physical, urgent, visceral involvement. In Cartesian terms, the language becomes a text of pulsional incidence, a language lined with flesh, a text where we can hear the grain of the throat, a whole cardinal stereophony, the articulation of the tongue, not meaning of language, or for Bissett, rainbow music. And inside the word rainbow, incidentally, in Hebrew has the word ein, and ein means both everything and nothing simultaneously. So just continuing our previous thought about that. So between the nothing and the allness, between time and difference, truth and meaning, the language of language, Bissett writes himself through a complex of codes, texts, borders, logic systems, saturated with a palimpsestic historicity of unpredictability, promiscuity, and possibility, where the meaning of meaning lies between the improper, inappropriate, improprietous, riotous, depropriated, expropriated, celebrating all that is insani, unsanitized, full of not causality, but semantic pausality, and repels, or propels itself between readability and resistance, and provides a political space to articulate and negotiate an unassimilable, aphoretic language within the contingent margins of prescience and sanity.